This is a big week for fans of Cities Skylines 2. We're getting a huge game update that improves performance, patches bugs, and provides access to a beta version of both the editor and Paradox mods. And with all of these exciting updates to the base game, we're also getting our hands on our first new content for the game, the Beach Properties Asset Pack, and a new radio station, the Deluxe Relax Station. So in this video, we're going to go through all of it, starting with what I feel are the most important parts of this update and making our way towards the inconsequential, and in some cases, downright bad things. And because this is such an important update, I've re-benchmarked the game. So stay tuned for that and look in the pinned comment for the results and test files. And without any further ado, let's jump right in. First up has to be Paradox mods. Modding is so important to Cities Skylines. I think it's going to be what keeps this game relevant in the future, and it's going to be what brings people to Cities Skylines right now. Now, I know a lot of people were worried that the Paradox Mods platform was going to be a worse version of the Steam Workshop, but in my experience, there are some things that it does significantly better, even in its beta state, and I can see how in the future this is going to be far superior to the Steam Workshop if they keep going down this path. Now, first up, one of the things I love about this is it's integrated right into the game. And when you add a map, for instance, you don't have to exit out. You can just download it in here and go right into the game. For code modding, you still have to restart, but that's kind of to be expected. And I assume with assets, you'll be able to just click on it directly in Paradox Mods and go straight into the game. And you're also able to access it right in game from the pause menu. There it is, which is going to be really exciting in the future. When you think of an asset that you want to subscribe to, you can do it right from within the game. Obviously, assets aren't available just yet, but it still bodes well for the future. Now, when you click on Paradox Mods, it's going to flash this screen. We're going to freeze on this for a moment because what it's doing is updating all of the different mods that you have available to you. And I love that because that's a problem I always had with the Steam Workshop, was that things wouldn't update and you'd have to use a mod like Skyview to actually force an update. And before that, it was lots of crazy stuff, restarting, validation of your game, lots of things to try to force a mod update. Now, when you get into Paradox Mods, you're going to be greeted with the featured screen, which has some of the most popular mods available to you right here. So you can already see there's a lot of great mods available. We've got Move It and Anarchy, Unlock All Tiles, Better Bulldozer. A lot of old mods that were really fantastic have been recreated in Cities Skylines 2. Now, I mentioned recreation because these are not direct ports. It is a different game, and they had to be built from the ground up. So when you see Move It in here, understand that Keyboard is actually really doing a lot of work to recreate this, and there are things that are going to be different. But it's really easy to subscribe to these mods. Let's say you want extra landscaping tools. Right here, you just click on this button and it will begin to download. And for extra landscaping tools, it looks like we need a dependency. You can click on this right here, add required mods, and it will download. It looks like extra library was what we needed to be able to get this thing working. It downloaded both of those for us. Now, the second tab is browse, and this is probably going to be the most useful one for most people. And that's because this is the area where you'll be able to search for specific mods or maps or filter and narrow them down. So let's say you want to find Magnolia County. You can just type Magnolia up here, hit enter, and here it is. You can also use the tags over here to filter. So you could just select map. And I know that Magnolia County is a North American map, so I'll select North American as well. That filters it down, and there's Magnolia County. Now, if we want to subscribe to this, or we're on the fence, we're not sure if we want to subscribe, we can click on this icon right here, and I've got to fix that, center the logo. We'll get to that. You will see that you can have a couple of images of your mod. You can learn more information about it, such as the number of people that are subscribed or like it, the suggested version of the game, the author, the size of the mod itself. You can have a description down here, and then you can have more about this mod. Now, this is one of the things that I think is really special about Paradox Mods. So I'm linking to the YouTube playlist for Magnolia County, just in case you're interested in that. But you can also link to GitHub, you can link to Patreon, you can link to Twitch, whatever you want to link to. Now, the Patreon and the GitHub are the things that I think are most interesting to me, because if a GitHub link is on here, presumably if a mod author no longer wants to update the mod or abandons it, you will be able to have that mod carried on by someone else. It also is a way to take a look at the code to make sure that there aren't nefarious actors inserting and injecting things into there, which is a problem that we have with Cities Skylines 1. And the Patreon link that you see right here is really exciting because it means that you can directly support your favorite modders, and Paradox Mods is really encouraging you to do that by providing the direct link right there. So I think this is really, really good. The third link that we have right here is playsets. Now, playsets, think of these as collections, but personal collections. This is really big for me because I have multiple cities going on at once. And in Cities Skylines 1, I had multiple Windows accounts to manage those. I no longer have to do that here. So I had the initial playset. You'll have that when you load into Paradox Mods, but I've also created Magnolia County. And this allows you to basically switch between these playsets for different builds and activate or deactivate all of your mods quickly. So let's say I want to go back to the initial playset. I click use this playset, and now all of the mods in the initial playset are active. So just these 6 mods. Let's say I want to go back to Magnolia County, click on this, activate this, and there I go. Magnolia County is now my active playset. All the mods that I have enabled in here are now enabled. Now I mentioned that because within the playset, you can troubleshoot by enabling and disabling mods. All you gotta do is click on this, you can delete mods from here, and you can modify the load order of the mods. So really cool to have that amount of flexibility in this beta version of Paradox Mods. And then finally, we have our library over here. Now, a way that I like to think of this is the library is everything that you've ever downloaded from Paradox Mods, and the playsets are basically like playlists. So it's just individual sets of maps and mods that you might use on a specific build. So even if you remove a mod or a map from a playset, it'll still be in your library. And if you remove it from your library, it'll be gone from all your playsets. So that's a brief overview of how the Paradox Mods platform works. I am going to go into more depth in probably a week or so, but there are a number of mods that are missing from the Paradox Mods platform right now, including some of my favorites, such as Legacy Flavor, and I want the video going over Paradox Mods to also include some of the best mods and how they work. So I'm going to wait for mods to be populated, and then I'm going to share that video with the modding community before I release it to the general public so that I can make sure that the information is as accurate as it can be. But I want to go over a couple of pros and cons of Paradox Mods really quickly, things that I've noticed so far that you might also notice. Number one, it keeps the mods up to date. We talked a little bit about that. When you load in, it immediately gives you this screen, which shows that it's keeping things up to date. Number two, it is fast. I think that's been evident as I go through here, just clicking back and forth through things. Very fast, easy to quickly subscribe to things. It has a fairly attractive design. It's easy on the eyes. I love that it is directly integrated into Cities Skylines 2, that it's right here. You don't have to go into the Steam Workshop. It is just right there. We touched on this, but I really love the way that Paradox Mods handles dependencies. Being able to just click on a mod and add the required dependencies makes it really easy to add mods that have dependencies, which a lot of the most popular mods do. And then finally, I really love the way that Paradox Mods handles the more about this mod section. Being able to have a direct link to GitHub, Discord, YouTube, Twitch, and Patreon means that you can support your favorite mod creators and learn more about the mod if you want to iterate on it or take it over if it becomes abandoned. However, Paradox Mods is not without flaws. I think first and foremost, the scaling kind of stinks. You get to the featured page and what you see is a gigantic welcome, and you have to scroll down to get to the mods themselves, which is probably the thing you're the most interested in. It's the same thing on the browse pages. These icons are way too big, and it's not really giving you enough information in my estimation. We have the mod name right here, but why don't we have a short description, which is a couple of sentences underneath, that would provide you more information that would be more valuable. Next, I really hope that they reconsider this rating system. Right now, it's just a straight thumbs up system, and I just don't think it provides as much useful information as a star rating system. So on Steam, you have the 5-star rating system, and it's much more useful. Like clearly right here, 17 people like Move It, but I don't know how much they like Move It, which could sway me if there were 2 mods that were relatively similar. Being able to allow that new mod to kind of take over if the overall star rating is better, but it has less people who have downloaded it because it's newer. Next is a really big omission that I really don't like. There is no place to comment directly on the mod and leave feedback about the mod. Now, especially with assets or after a big mod update, I look for those comments to see how people feel about it, to see if the mod still works. For assets, I look for try counts. If someone says, oh boy, the try count on this is absolutely ridiculous, I might not download it because I don't want it to tank the overall performance of my build. Now, right now, I know that you could add a forum link. I don't know that anyone's actually done it just yet, but that negates one of the things I said was good about Paradox Mods, that it keeps you within Cities Skylines. So if we have to click on a forum link to learn more about the mod and discuss it, I think that is a huge step backwards from Steam. So I really hope they reconsider this one. And then this featured page really isn't useful. So first of all, you're looking all the most popular mods here. The rating system that I already said I don't like isn't present here. So that to me is a very strange thing. I think we're really just looking at total number of downloads will make this show up here. And that is a flawed system because you can already see that we've got 2 dependencies showing up here because they've been downloaded a lot. And I would assume that at some point in time, this entire page is populated by dependencies. It's not dividing it up by mods. It's not dividing it up by maps. And that's one way that when I would basically hop onto the Steam Workshop daily, I would filter by those categories and then filter by my favorite modders, the ones that I've subscribed to see if they've released new things. Can't do that here yet either. And then lastly, and probably my biggest concern with Paradox mods are the playsets. Now I said I love the playsets. I also dislike them because I can't share them. Now this is a feature that could be added in the future, and I really hope that it is because they're basically the same thing as collections on the Steam Workshop. And right now, if I were to create Magnolia County and try to share all of my mods with you, I couldn't do that. That also means that for a save, you can't link your collection as a dependency. And if you could do that, this would blow Steam out of the water. So I really hope that that feature gets added because it's a bit of a missed opportunity right now. We have to remember that Paradox Mods is still in beta, and there are a lot of exciting things about this platform. I think it has a bright future, and it could be the very best platform that we could have asked for Cities Skylines 2. So if there are things that you see, I would highly encourage you to jump into the Paradox forums and let them know what would make this platform better because it's still in beta. They're still improving it. The other thing to keep in mind is that though assets are not available, it even says right here in the featured page that though it's not supported, as soon as assets are able to be imported within the editor and saved in the game, you will see them show up here in Paradox Mods as well. So I think the future is really bright with Paradox Mods, and I'm actually really happy that we have Paradox Mods and not Steam Workshop support. That's a spicy hot take, but I think it's going to be really good. Now let's talk performance because that is one of the areas where this new build really shines. So to test performance, I dusted off our old Magnolia saves, Magnolia being our 100,000 population test city, so that we could directly compare this build against previous builds. But before I could run any tests, I did have to make a couple of adjustments to the map. In particular, when I booted this up, there were a bunch of power bottlenecks. So I had to add things like this transformer along the highway in a few different locations so that the power isn't bottlenecked and we could run the test without completely killing the city. So I did upload a new version of the 100,000 population city, and I also speed ran to 150,000 population so we could take some of our best runs and try it on an even larger city. And then I decided I really should standardize our weather because now we have the ability to because we have the dev mode. And I took the climate time, I adjusted it to 50%. And then I took the cloudiness and the precipitation and adjusted them both to 0.25%. So for all of the new runs, these are the default climate settings that I used. And reasonably, this is just one more control, a way to make sure that all of the runs are as consistent as possible. And I tried to make the weather a little bit worse than I think it was in the previous runs so that things don't look skewed towards the positive in these current runs. And then for the graphic settings this time around, rather than doing a bunch of custom stuff, I just tested for low, very low, medium, and high as it was appropriate and made sure that VSync was off. So there should be direct comparisons between our previous runs and our current runs. Looking at our results, starting with the Ryzen 2600X system, you can see that pretty much every GPU across the board has better average FPS, and the jumps are pretty considerable, though they are higher with the NVIDIA GPUs than with the AMDs. But I think what's most impressive is the jump in 1% lows, at least with the NVIDIA GPUs. For some of these cards, the jump was considerable, but reasonably the game was playable across pretty much all cards. I do want to warn you though, with AMD GPUs, the results weren't quite as impressive and in some cases, a slight step backwards. Moving to our Ryzen 3600 system, you see that the results are more or less the same. Really impressive jumps with NVIDIA GPUs, with AMD GPUs, some jumps, but they're not quite as impressive. And I do want to point out this one right here, the RX 6800 XT on high. You are seeing this going backwards. I have no explanation for this. I reran the test a number of times, and the results came back worse. So my suspicion is that maybe it's a driver thing, but I'm not sure why this would be happening otherwise. Moving over to our Ryzen 5600X system, we finally get a look at the Arc GPU, and I'm really happy to report that the Arc GPUs did a really good job this time around. Performance was strong on both the 100,000 and the 150,000 City. They performed more or less along the lines of a mid-range NVIDIA GPU. And then lastly, with our two higher end builds, we're seeing improvements in both average FPS and 1% lows, though they're not quite as dramatic as they were on some of the lower and mid-range hardware. And honestly, that's fine by me. Low and mid-range cards is where we were seeing most of our performance issues. And honestly, if we want to see a console release, that's where we need to see most of our performance jumps, because that's more or less the range where a modern console falls anyway. So I didn't want to stop at just FPS. FPS is definitely important, but a lot of people talked about the simulation speed slowing down as you would build a larger and larger city. So I thought about the best way to test this, and what I came up with is testing a city that was 10,000, 100,000, and 150,000 for the length of time it would take to simulate 1 hour in game. So in the previous build, what you'd see is that for 10,000, it was 3 minutes and 2 seconds, for 100,000, 3 minutes and 5 seconds, and for 150,000, 3 minutes and 28 seconds. Compare that to the new build, where it is kind of across the board in the low 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 seconds, 3 minutes, 2 seconds, 3 minutes, 5 seconds. We've seen some dramatic improvements in the simulation itself. So I think my top line takeaway here is that if performance has sidelined you, you might want to give the game a shot again, because things should perform better for you. If you built a large city and the simulation was slow, also give that city a try again, because things might work appropriately. All in all, some really impressive results here with performance. Next, let's talk bug fixes. So I've loaded up Magnolia County episode 18 at the very start because it will help us demonstrate some of the fixes. I think the fixes generally fall into two different categories: things that are related to land value, and then other small stuff, much of which you might not notice. So let's start out with land value. So in general, land value's had some significant improvements, but it's not all the way there. So if we take a look right here at our land value, you can see I've let this run for maybe 4 hours, and our overall land value is 19,000 per cell. So that is a huge improvement. We don't see the spiraling near our offices. We don't see industrial property going through the roof. And you can actually see what is causing land value to increase now, because we have this land value sources thing. So we have some commercial properties right here. Proximity to those commercial properties would improve land value. So that is the sorts of things that we're seeing here. To fix the build, I did have to play a little bit of whack-a-mole. So the land value overhaul mod got a lot of the buildings to level up to level 5. So I had to go through and eliminate some of those so that we could get rid of some of the high rent complaints. That said, there are other issues with high rent. We'll get to that a little bit later on. So from my understanding, there are a number of things that now impact land value that didn't in the past, such as proximity to services, proximity to certain commercial amenities, proximity to shorelines, and proximity to different sorts of pollution, noise, air, and ground. And maybe most impactful, there is now a cap to land value so that you don't see a particular cell spiraling out of control. Another big improvement in this build is that when you are in the land value menu, you can actually see the land value of any specific property and get an idea of why someone might be complaining that the rent is too high. So that's just really helpful to be able to see that land value indicator there now. Next, this one isn't so much a bug fix so much as a quality of life improvement. When you place landscaping now, the trees actually rotate. So you can't actually tell it when you're placing the trees, but if you look at them afterwards, you can see that these things are all spun around. So that is a great improvement for landscaping. But now I've got to switch gears to some bad stuff. Now, I mentioned high rent a minute ago because the high rent indicators are still all over the place. And one thing that I've been noticing is that many times when you see these, it's actually children and teens living by themselves like you see here. It's really disappointing that this is still in the build, but I guess we're going to have to deal with it for a little bit longer. Let's say you pop into the parks menu and you want to place a park and you hit I because you want to get out of this crazy whiteness view. You can't. It is just kind of stuck like this now. So I don't know that that's an improvement. That kind of bums me out, especially now that I don't have legacy flavor just yet anyway with this new build. And then there are things like the dairy house that I know a lot of people wanted to see fixed. It is not fixed. I've deleted this thing. I've replaced it. It still doesn't work. It never gets a company. So there are bugs like that that are still in the game that have not yet been resolved. The other one is our tax situation. So even though land value was partially addressed, we are still generating ridiculous amounts of tax revenue. I think the easiest way to see this is actually looking at your statistics. You can see where this bug was introduced. If you take a look at the income, boom, we have a whole bunch of income. It is dropped down a little bit, but it has not been resolved. So this bug is still in there. So if you're looking for more of a challenge, you're not going to find it in this build of the game. We are still generating a ton of tax revenue. I want to point out a bug that was actually introduced in this build. So if you've been using TAA anti-aliasing, you are going to have a bad time, and I would highly recommend disabling it. If you were to use TAA and try to landscape, you'll notice that there's a big problem here. If you're looking right overhead, you have your cursor in the right spot, but if you are at all off axis, you can see that your cursor is doing some pretty crazy things at this point. This is only related to TAA anti-aliasing. In fact, check this out. I've gone ahead and disabled that using one of the default settings, and everything is just fine. Now, all of that said, I am just pleased that the city will not implode after a while. What we will see now is that though we have some land value complaints, we can let this simulate as long as we want, and the city will continue to exist and things won't get out of hand. So much better state of affairs as far as land value goes. Other things still need to be addressed, but land value is, at least in my book, the #1 issue, and it is being somewhat resolved, especially as it relates to the overall average land value, which was our biggest issue. Next, we'll take a look at the editor, and I'm going to be completely upfront with you right away. This is much less polished than Paradox Mods. So I'd estimate that Paradox Mods is 85% of the way complete. It feels like the editor is 40 to 45% of the way complete. So this is available on the main menu, and it says beta, and it's a little bit beta. Oh, and look at this. It's reminding us again that this is a beta version of the editor that only features the map creation tools. And it's doing that because we do have some of the asset functionality in here already. It just isn't fully baked. And if you were to try to create an asset in here, you wouldn't be able to save it. All that said, what we are really caring about right now is the map creation tools. And if you use the unofficial version of the map creation tools, this probably looks really familiar to you. And that is one of the reasons why I say it's still a little bit underbaked. If you wanted to load up a map that you've already created, for instance, you'd probably think that you can hit the escape button and load, but all you can do is make a new map here. If you want to load your map, you got to actually click on map, and then load is down here. So that's not very intuitive, and that kind of speaks to the editor as a whole. Thankfully, Colossal Order has put together a wiki, which you can find. I'll link it in the video description, but here's what it looks like. And it basically walks you through the map creation process. You got a couple of different options. You could just start working on a blank map like this, using the terrain tools to create your own heights and make your own landscape, or you could import a height map, which is exactly what you could do in Cities Skylines 1 as well, using a height map exporting tool and then importing the export from that website into the game. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little disappointed that this wasn't built into the game. I was really hoping that Cities Skylines 2 would bring that functionality right into the game so that rather than using third-party tools, we could just use the game to create our own height maps, but that is not available in here. The terrain tools, if you wanted to make your own terrain, are more robust than you have in the default game. You can go through and select a different brush size. Let's say you want to paint a mountain, for instance. There is a mountain brush in here. You can adjust the brush rotation and the strength and size, and then come through and just easily click and add a mountain, which is really outstanding. In fact, using the height map importer with these terrain tools, some map creators have been able to come up with stuff that is really mind-blowing. But rather than doing all of this, let's go and load up Magnolia counties. There is one bit of really exciting news about this. It means that maps that were created using the unofficial editing tools do still work, and that I'm thrilled about. So Magnolia County's fine. Saves created using those maps are fine. Everything is good to go. That said, there is still a lot of the unofficial editor in here. One of the things I was really hoping would be resolved is we've got these scalers that really slow everything down. They are still present here, and I don't know how to turn them off. And in fact, they're bugged. If you hover over one of the top red arrow, it'll light an object on fire, which is hilarious, but also it has a pretty big impact on performance. All that said, I'm not going to dwell on that. I will kind of highlight a couple of things that are interesting. So if you're in the map menu, you can see that you have all the information about your map. And then there's the checklist, which you have to fulfill if you want to have a complete map. So all of that is available within map. Within climate, you can see that there's a lot that you can do in here. Create seasons, adjust your default weather, and all that's really good and well. but none of it saves right now. The only thing that I've been able to do is actually load a climate prefab and adjust it here and just load it in. That's about the only thing that I can get to save. So that is a limitation of the editor and where it's at right now. So just know if you're making a map, you're not going to be able to change the weather in a very significant way outside of loading an existing climate. One of the big improvements from the unofficial editor is the water function. So now you have the ability to add and place individual water spawners, adjust them, and choose the kind of spawners that they are. So there are these constant rate spawners that will just spawn a constant water flow rate from the spawner. I didn't use any of those on this map. If you want to make a lake, you'd add one of these constant level water spawners. That's what we've added to all of these lakes. And the nice thing is, now when you place them right here, you can move them around if they're in the wrong spot. And the reason why I say that is so impressive is within the unofficial editor, you actually had to adjust the position using coordinates. It took a long time. It was really, really painful. You also have these river water source spawners and the sea spawners. So different types of spawners depending on the different application. And then another nice quality of life function that we have added is the ability to adjust the water simulation speed. If you've ever made a map, you know that it takes a while for the water simulation to kind of settle down. And I spent hours just watching each of these spawners that I added and making sure that it wasn't going to flood things out. You can now adjust the simulation speed to 128 times, which is wildly helpful. And next you have resources, and this is something that I think is really outstanding in this game. So you have the ability to paint resources just like you could in Cities Skylines 1, but unlike Cities Skylines 1, you can overlap resources. So I didn't do any of that on this map, but let's say I wanted the fertile ground to extend into the ore. You can do that. So just select your fertile ground and then just drag it in. And we have overlapping resources right here, which is really, really cool. Now, one thing I want you to be very careful about, there are these import texture things. It doesn't actually import textures, but you can inadvertently clear all of your work. So just look at this. We've got all of our fertile ground right here. If I click clear fertile land, it doesn't clear the texture. It actually clears all the fertile land that I've painted. And there is no undo function in this editor anywhere. So you've just lost all of your work. So I guess also save often if you're going to use this thing. And then finally, over in your workspace, you have all of these different objects. And this is one of my big complaints with the editor. So you can't search your objects, and every single tree, every single object, they all show up in here. So it's really not useful at all. It provides you with a bunch of noise. Let's say I want to learn more about this hickory tree right here. It gives me all of this information that is not editable. So I can't delete it. I can't adjust this in any specific way. It's just there. So I can use this to locate that specific tree if I cared about that specific tree and then duplicate it. This could be useful for wildlife spawners, but that's about the only practical purpose that I've found for it, at least in my map creation efforts. And then finally, I want to dive into the add object menu because this is really powerful and also really kind of convoluted. So this probably will look familiar to you if you've ever used the dev menu, though I believe that these sorting options are new. So it has a bunch of different things that you can place if you wanted to place a specific building. Like, let's say we want to search for a barn. We can search for a barn and we can place these. Now, it's really helpful. You can spin it around, place it wherever you'd want. This also gives me a lot of hope for props. I know that there hasn't been any committal to props being in the game, but seeing how this works makes me feel good, except that I can't overlap things. So keep that in mind as well. There's a little bit of everything within this menu, including the ability to add surfaces, the ability to place buildings, people, foliage, everything. But one of the things I want to point out that's super powerful, that's going to cause me to actually modify my Magnolia County map, is the ability to adjust a map tile. So if you go into areas and you click on map tile, you can actually adjust the starting tiles here. So let's say you want the map tiles to actually conform to the land. You can go through and adjust these. This is so cool. just like full stop. This is something that I didn't even think about, that I would want this. But now seeing that I can do it, I can blast that one away and make my own tile. This is game changing, because you can actually unlock tiles that make sense. So this will work. So if you want to make a map that unlocks things in a bit more realistic way based on the terrain, you can now do this. And thankfully, in some of these menus, such as roads, things are well organized. You do see the little icon right there. So it does give me hope for things like props. That was really what we were looking at when we see all, is there are a ton of props in this game, all of which are very well detailed, very nice props. It's tough to find them because they're not well labeled and there are no icons. So hopefully that gets resolved in the future. And hopefully things that maybe aren't super useful get hidden, because I don't necessarily need to place an electrical light box when I'm building a map, though this would be very helpful if I were building an asset. And it just kind of seems like everything is blended together right now. So all in all, the editor is very powerful. It still needs some work, but you are going to be able to create some absolutely outstanding maps if you have a little bit of patience. If you don't have patience or aren't interested in making maps, the tools that are here are going to allow people who do like to create maps to create some really outstanding things and provide that to you right on Paradox Mods. So I think it's outstanding that we have access to this. And even with the shortcomings, it is an outstanding tool. Next up is the Deluxe Relax Station radio station. That's really a mouthful. But the reason why this is where it is on the list is really two reasons. First of all, it's a radio station. I will admit, biased towards not really loving the radio station packs. This one is completely fine. You're listening to it right now. The songs are good. It's relaxing. And if you're into that sort of thing, you might be interested in this. My bigger concern is really about the price. So if you look right now on the Steam page, this is Friday, you'll notice that the price is not listed anywhere on here. But if you go to this press release that is not well advertised, you'll see that this is $5, $4.50 in pounds, or €5. Now that is interesting, because if we take a look at Synthetic Dawn from Cities Skylines, this is $4. So that is a 25% increase in the price of a radio station. Now, you might say, well, maybe there's just more content for this. Well, Synthetic Dawn has 16 original radio stations, and that's what we're seeing here as well. 16 music tracks and some DJ voice tracks. To me, I can't really figure out why it's more expensive. Reasonably, that's a lot more. 25% more for a radio station seems a little bit ridiculous. And honestly, the price of these makes me want to just recommend going to Paradox Mods and picking up the Extended Radio mod. So what this mod allows you to do is add custom radio stations that people have created. I'm not sure if these have actually actively migrated their way into Paradox Mods just yet, but there were a number of City Rat stations available, and other creators have made stations as well. And you'll notice right here, all of the different Master Plan music albums made their way in here, and all of that would be available to you for free. You wouldn't have to pay $5 for 16 tracks. So I'd rely on mods for this. Unless you're a completionist, I'm not sure why you would necessarily pay for this. Now, if you just want to hear it, I have a sneaking suspicion that just like the radio stations from Cities Skylines, they'll make their way onto Spotify and Apple Music. So just sit tight. You will have access to these in a different way that doesn't charge you $5. But this price increase isn't just for radio stations, and it leads us to our final topic, the Beach Properties Asset Pack. I'm going to be upfront with you and say that I think that this is the worst add-on content that has ever come out for a Cities Skylines game. And let me explain why. If you buy this asset pack, this is what you are getting. And it might look like a lot. It looks like 180 growables plus 6 signature buildings. Some are North American, like these ones over here. These ones are European. And then you also get 4 new trees, just like they said. But here's the thing. If you look a little bit closer, it's actually a little bit different than it seems. You can see that the first 2 buildings are the same, level 1, level 2. Level 3 and level 4 are the same, and then you get a different level 5. So you actually only get 3 new models for every building size, or 108 growables total. So the value proposition is much worse than it originally seemed. There's a few other problems I have with this as well. These don't really scream beach, do they? Does a ranch scream beach? Do any of these really scream beach to you? I think you can make a case for some of them, but for most of them, you just might see them in a random subdivision in a random place. And for the European assets, it's much the same. 1 and 2 are the same, 3 and 4 are the same, and then you get a different level 5. And again, they all kind of feel placeless, and it's disappointing. I mean, some of these almost look the same. This one right here looks the same as this one. It just has a bigger lot, so that's maybe even fewer assets. And what this all means is that when you zone in a neighborhood, you're going to see a lot of the same buildings, and it's not going to feel very diverse. And that's the exact problem we already have with Cities Skylines 2, is that there just aren't very many assets, and this doesn't help things. And on that note, I've laid these out so that assets of the same size are next to each other. So these are 2x2 lots, so is this one. So if you were to zone a North American 2x2 lot, you will either get this building right here or this one. If you were to go for 2x3, you get this one, because there is not a second variation. So most of these lot sizes only have one variation, and a couple of them have two. So again, not very much diversity, and it's the exact same thing over here. Now, if you were to zone these into a neighborhood, this is what it could look like. And let's be honest, the assets are attractive, but once again, there's not very much diversity. I'm noticing that on this block alone, we've got 3 of the exact same house. And don't get me wrong, that happens, but it shouldn't be every single block in your city. Right here, same house as these, right on the corner right here, right next to each other, both in white. And you'll see that exact same pattern throughout this entire area. And I've alternated back and forth between North American and European. I bet you'd be hard pressed to figure out what is what. So right here, everything that I placed is 180 growables. However, there are only 108 unique assets in here, plus the 6 specialty buildings. So there's really not that many assets that you're getting with this. So a couple of problems I have with this. There are no commercial buildings. There are no hotels. There's no density. And probably the most damning thing about this is that there are no shoreline features in an asset pack about beaches. So that means that there are no beaches. There are no quay walls. There are no piers. There are no props. There's nothing in this that screams beach. And even the buildings, like I said, don't scream beach to me. And all of that isn't even the worst thing. The worst thing is actually right here. The worst thing is that we get 4 trees as a part of this asset pack. And this is the first time that I can recall that landscaping has ever been included as part of a DLC. And what this means is that if you want to build a tropical map, you have to have this asset pack included as a dependency. So you can't have a tropical map unless you have this asset pack, at least not for now. Also, this asset pack doesn't come with any maps. So there are no tropical maps. You can just place these tropical plants within your temperate map. It's just incredibly frustrating. Now, I remember I worked on the Airports DLC, and one of the things that came with the Airports DLC was a number of really excellent Mr. Mason trees, and those came as a free update to anyone who had the game. It came alongside that DLC, and it was a great nod to the community and a thank you for being a longtime player. And I just don't understand why these weren't included as free assets. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. It's really not a great precedent to set. And honestly, considering there are no palm trees in the game at all, it just feels wrong to me. It just feels wrong that they're doing this. And you get all of this for $10. $10. And I want you to think about what you could get for $10, or maybe what you could get in the past for $10. So just last year, you were able to buy one of the fantastic content creator packs that came out for $6. So the sports venues content creator pack, $6. And the other content creator packs that were released at that time, including Brooklyn and Queens, Railroads of Japan, and Industrial Evolution, all were $6 each as well. The Airports DLC that I talked about, that was $13. And the mini DLCs, such as Financial Districts and Hotels and Retreats, those were both $8, and they added a brand new functionality to the game. But here, you get the privilege of having 108 growable assets that kind of look placeless, without any commercial assets, without any density, without any parks, without quay walls, without anything that screams beach, and without any new functionality added at all for $10. And it just feels like this shouldn't have been that expensive. And I want you to know that this is implemented as a zoning category. So this is implemented the exact same way as any of the other zoning categories and has just about the same number of assets. And considering you're getting 2 zoning categories, you're basically paying $5 per zoning category. Is it worth it? That would mean that the zoning categories that come with the game are worth $110. I'll be honest with you, it's not worth it to me. It's kind of mind-blowing that this is the price that they think that they're going to get for it. I think that $4 might have made sense. I think that $5 might have made sense. This honestly could have just been a free add-on because of the lack of diversity in base game assets. But instead, what we're seeing is that this is $10. I'm really hopeful that in the future, this will not be the price of DLCs. And if this is the price that they want DLCs to be, they need to have more content. This is way less content than we got in Cities Skylines 1, and I understand it's likely more challenging to make these assets, but this is 1/5 the price of the base game, and it's delivering a fraction of the content. And honestly, I'm super disappointed that I feel this way. I wish it was a better buy. I wish it was something that I could recommend, and I hope in the future the rest of them are, but I would certainly pass on this one for now. And if you're a completionist and you want to have everything that goes with the game, wait until it goes on sale. It'll probably be a more reasonable price at that point in time. But I think that we're gonna leave it here, and I'm really sorry to end on such a downer note, but I wanted to lead with some of the good things because I really do believe that most of what we're getting is good things. We're getting performance improvements, we're getting Paradox mods, we're getting access to create custom maps and a way to share them easily. So it is mostly good things, just one bad thing, and that's this asset pack. And hopefully in the future, we won't have to deal with these prices anymore because it's really too high for the content that we're getting. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And I want to thank you for your time today. It's a privilege to be able to bring videos like this one to you, and I appreciate your time. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.